Greetings. One of the questions I see online a lot is which airbrush should I get as a beginner for miniature painting? And there are always about three that I recommend, and I just happen to have all three of them, so I figured I would take a little video. I don't normally do these, and show all of them, and show the pros and cons of each, talk about the prices, talk about which ones I like and why, and just kind of go from there. This one right here that you can see is a Badger brand Patriot 105, and these are pretty inexpensive for a name brand airbrush. They're not horribly expensive. They're usually under $100, and they're on sale frequently on places like Amazon. This is a 0.5 nozzle, if I remember correctly. I could be completely wrong there, but I think it's a 0.5. And it's a good airbrush. For me, I like using it for things like primer, which is generally thick and hard to spray, base coating larger models, and doing things like that. You can do some fine work with it, but it's better suited for larger work, at least in the miniature realm, things like tanks, monstrous creatures, and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and load it up with some paint, and I'm going to show you some of the different size patterns that I can make with it. So give me a minute. Okay, I've got some Vallejo Game Air Magic Blue paint, and this is what I'm going to use, and I'm going to spray it straight out of the bottle. I'll shake it up real quick. And generally with airbrush paints, you need to thin them much more so than you do even with brush painting. And that's especially true if you have a brush with a smaller nozzle, like say a 0.2 or a 0.3. So I'm gonna put some paint in here real quick. And you can see it in the cup there. This is a gravity fed airbrush. Highly recommend gravity fed for any kind of miniature painting. Siphon fed's not gonna work out for you very well. Anyway, let's see how big of an area can I paint with this. So you see, I just used all that paint in just a couple of seconds there, and I was able to paint a pretty large area, okay? So I'm gonna put a little bit more in, and we'll see how small of an area I can get with the same settings. This is, I don't know what the PSI is there, about, I don't know, 30. Okay, so here we go. See, I can actually get a pretty small line with this. It's obvious that you can also do a pretty big one. And this is getting as close to the paper as possible. So this is actually not a bad brush. If you're going to just augment your brush painting, this was fine, because I mean you can get pretty small details with that. That's plenty good for most things you're going to want to use an airbrush for, you know, like fades and stuff. But you can also, you know, do some base coating, spray some primer, do stuff like that. You can get everywhere in between those two examples. So I'm going to come back after I put my next brush in and clean this one out real quick, because if you don't clean them, they're a pain to get to work, and they tend to not work if you don't clean them. Okay, the next brush I want to show you, this is the Iwata Eclipse. Ignore the fact that it's missing the back half. I lost that a long time ago. I have no idea what happened to it, and I'm too cheap to buy a new one. This is a great general purpose brush. I love this brush. It feels great in the hand. I feel like the Badgers really kind of set the standard, but the Iwata exceeds that same standard as far as quality, build quality, and how it just feels. I love this brush. I think it's great. I believe it's a 0.3 nozzle on this one, so it's going to be a little bit finer. It's going to be a little bit more important to thin your paints. I still do some base coating with this, but I generally don't run the primer through this one. I save the primer for the Patriot, but I'll do tanks. I'll do general base coating on smaller figures, but it's a good brush. I'm going to fill it with some paint real quick here. I'm going to use a different color and use it on the same paper so you can see how it looks, and I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. That took entirely too long because I'm an idiot. Anyway, here's the paint I'm using, and this is a Vallejo. This is Model Air instead of Game Air, but it's still one of their airbrush ones, and it's cyanide gray. So Here's our nice blue piece of paper from last time, and I'm going to go ahead and try to make as large of a pattern as I can with this, okay? We'll compare it to the badger. Now, this is the same air pressure that the Patriot was on. You can see it's about half the size. So, I mean, if I'm going to do a lot of base coating or base coating a really large model, I'm going to want to use the Patriot instead. Also, this one has a harder time shooting the primers. And I can get a little bit of a finer line with this one. This one it's very possible to do a fine line with this. I'll show a feature that the next airbrush has that makes it a little bit more suited for it. You can see it's a little bit thinner than the other one. And this is a 0.3 size nozzle on this one. You can also get these in 0.5s, I believe. Seems to be a little bit more conservative on how much paint it uses too, because, you know, like I said, it's not spraying as much at one time. So, you know, I just draw some random crap here. You can hear my compressor going off. My compressor is this nice little California Hertz rules, and that's actually pretty quiet for an industrial compressor. Most of them are quite a bit louder. Like if you get a full type compressor. This one's about 60 decibels, it says. I think it's actually a little bit louder. I think it's closer to like 65, but anyway, that's it. It has an air tank, which you can see right there. The air tank makes it so that you don't have it running constantly. Other airbrush tanks don't always have that feature, and that's definitely one that's nice to have. So I'm going to clean this brush out, and I'm going to come back with the next one, which is going to be the Badger Renegade Chrome with a 0.2 nozzle. Okay, I'm back. I'm about to put some paint in my Patriot Chrome with a 0.2 nozzle. Now this one I got because of a specific special feature it has that helps it do fine details more consistently. The clips can do those fine details. I mean, you can see that little line there. It's pretty tiny, some of those details it can do. It's not bad, but the Chrome has a feature, which I'll show you right now. Right there, that helps give it more consistent fine lines, and that's a needle stop. What that does right there is you can rotate that knob, and that little part in there will move forwards and backwards. I don't know if you can see this. I'll try to get it. So you can see that metal part getting closer to the needle chuck, and I can go this way and move it farther apart. That limits how far back I can pull the trigger. So if I tighten this all the way, you know, you can see it's right up against that needle chuck. I cannot physically pull the trigger back. I can pull it up, but I cannot pull it back. What that's going to do is basically turn this into a really fine detail single action airbrush. Now that one's not letting any paint through because this is a really fine nozzle. Like I said, that's more airbrush paint. That's another color of the Badger, or sorry, Vallejo Air. But if you play around with this needle stop, okay, it's not spraying at all right there, of course. It's kind of finicky, you have to play around with it. Come on. Still finicky. This paint might be too thick. It's one of the problems with the finer nozzle, so you have to thin your paint more. Now this is again straight out of the bottle like last time. Okay, so that's wider than I wanted. Go down a little bit. Yeah, not sure. Of course, I'm doing a video and it's not doing it for me. I promise this works because I do all those guys in there were painted with this brush. So let's try again. I don't know if you can see how fine those lines are going. It's clogging a bunch, which happens with this brush. Not because it's a bad brush, just because it's a small nozzle. Oh, too much. You see when I first spray, after I get some paint out and I first spray, you get those splatters. That's because there's actually paint drying on, or getting on the tip right there. and when you give it air, that paint goes flying. So you need to make sure when you're working with a model not to do that, because it'll look really bad. Let's see. Let's try to get a nice fine line here. It's kind of tricky because you have to pull it back enough to let some paint out, but not so much that it just floods your workpiece. Yeah, this paint doesn't want to cooperate. There we go. See that? I can get... Okay, I need to adjust my needle stop again. That's the tricky part, is adjusting everything. Once you get it adjusted, it's fine, I promise. I'm trying to show how awesome this brush is, and I'm having nothing but trouble with it right now. I've never sprayed this color before, so... Okay. Let's see. Too much. Probably gonna edit some of this out. Maybe. I don't know. Okay. I'm still having issues with that needle stop. Adjusted a couple more times, but you can see right there, that's pretty fine. But that's not really any finer than those ones. And it's a little bit finer than the Patriot, but it's not much different from the Eclipse. Like I said, the biggest thing is with that needle stop, it's a lot easier to be consistent with your line, because, if we can get this to show here, I can pull it back all the way with that needle stop and don't have to worry about trying to balance it in one spot. Good. Let's call it back flush here and see if that helps any. No. Alright. And in theory, there's like a micrometer on this thing, and you can set it to like numbers. I don't know if you can see that numbers on there, but I just kind of skipped that feature. There you go. Because of that needle stop, the line will not get any thicker than that. Now the reason it stops spraying like that is if you look at this needle, it's kind of that yellow color. That paint has gotten stuck on the tip there, and it will do that fairly often because it's a small nozzle and I'm not using very much air. So fairly often you'll have to either do a back flush or cleaner tip when you're doing this. And, you can build up color in one spot, do really fine areas. I mean, that's tiny. That's very tiny. I mean, compare that finger per scale to those. It takes a lot of work with adjusting the stop and trying to get it just right. But once you have it dialed in, I can repeat that thickness all day long because that stop's not going to move any. And I can just keep doing that, which is one of the reasons I like this brush. Now, let's do it the opposite. Let's open this all the way and see how big of a pattern we can do with this brush, okay? So you can see now, I have just opened that up all the way, and we'll see how big of a pattern we can get with this. If you look, that is quite a bit smaller than the Patriot. A little bit smaller than the Eclipse. Still usable though. I mean, I could base coat with this. I could maybe prime, but the primer is thicker and isn't gonna want to go through the brush very well. So it'd be really hard. So I wouldn't use, since I have all three, I would not use this one for priming. I would just use one of the other ones for it. Basically, if they're only going to have one brush, I'm probably going to recommend the Eclipse because it can do fine detail. The Eclipse can do fine detail. It's easier with this one. But the Eclipse can also base coat. It can also do primer. It's probably the most expensive of the three. This one has come down in price a lot. It's right around $100. The reason I got this one over, say, the Sotar 2020 was mostly just because this is a newer brush, and I figured anything they learned about the Sotar when making it, they could apply to this one. Don't know if that's true or not, just kind of speculation. But This is a great brush. It's right around $100. It's actually not that much more expensive than the Patriot, which makes it hard to recommend the Patriot over this unless you're just going to use it for priming and base coating. Because this can do base coating, not especially well, but it can do it, and it can do fine detail. I'll show you some examples here. These are Warhammer 40,000 Imperial Guardsmen. These were painted entirely, including the faces there, with this Renegade Chrome. I've been painting for a long time. I'm not the greatest at it. In fact, sometimes I'm pretty awful at it, but I'm able to get 75 of these guardsmen here completely painted. The skin inside that eye slit was done with that chrome. That's pretty fine detail. I'll show you some of my other work if you're interested with some of the other brushes I've done. I usually use my Eclipse for like my tanks. Same thing. The skin inside the helmet there was done with Renegade Chrome. Everything on this model was. The only things I didn't do on these guys with the airbrush is the models that have hair. I did the hair with a hand brush because, wasn't going to do that. And this guy's headset, the headsets were done with a hand brush. Everything else, the skin, the guns, everything was done with the Renegade Chrome. Anyway, I'm Michael Covington. Thanks for watching. I don't know how many of these I'll do, but if there's any more questions, I might, write a comment, email me, whatever, and I'll see what I can do, and I'll answer whatever questions anybody has. Thanks a lot.